I really appreciate you joining me today, and this is the final episode in a story that we've been covering for several months now. Sabina Nessa went missing in September of last year, and I've covered the story from the second she went missing up until the actual trial. In this episode, we're going to be going through the new CCTV that has been released and also the evidence that was used to convict him. And firstly, before we start, I'd like to send my condolences to the friends and family of Sabina Nessa, and I know she is missed every day. On the 17th of September 2021, Koci Salemaj from Terminus Road, Eastbourne, travelled from his home to Cator Park in Kidbrooke, where he lay in wait for the unsuspecting victim that would come his way. Koci and Sabina did not know each other and they had never met before. At around 8:30 p.m, Sabina was walking through the park, and this is when he carried out a ferocious and sexually motivated attack before fleeing the scene. The judge said that the murder was appalling and that he will now serve at least 36 years in jail. He was described by the detective in the case as a dangerous and violent offender and showed no remorse for his heinous actions. He carried out a premeditated, brutal murder, and for that he would spend the majority of his life in prison. Sabina was missing, as I covered in the second episode of the 4 episodes that I've done on this story, for 24 hours before her body was found at 5:20 on the 18th of September. She was discovered by somebody walking her dog in Cator Park, and she was partially covered in the long grass. A murder investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Crime Command, and the victim was identified very shortly after. She was a teacher originally from Bedfordshire and lived at the address that overlooked the park. Sabina left her flat at 20 to 9 on the previous evening to meet a friend in a bar in Kidbrooke Village. She had gone through the park as she was running late, and it was the quickest route to the venue. Grainy footage from inside the park showed Sabina walking through, and a hooded man passed her and looked in her direction and then ran quickly towards her. Sabina was unaware of the man approaching, and by the last minute she was able to turn, and then he violently struck her in the head, and the judge said that he hit her a total of 36 times in very quick succession, and the weapon that he used shattered and fell to the ground. He then dragged her unconscious into a grass slope and out of sight of the camera, and after around 10 minutes he reappeared on camera and began picking up pieces of the murder weapon that was strewn across the park. He also used tissues to clean the bench where part of the attack had taken place, and CCTV also captured him leaving the scene, but it didn't provide a clear image of the suspect. I also covered this as well, where the Metropolitan Police released the images to try to get an identification, and very shortly after they did. Through retracing the steps via CCTV, they was able to see him entering the park and driving a vehicle on Peglar Square in the Kidbrooke area at 20 to 8, an hour after the murder. Finding the car was a turning point in the investigation, and the CCTV of the vehicle was also blurry, and there was no way to make out the registration number. However, the police and the investigation team began to try to track the silver or beige Nissan Micra. Police later discovered it was a Micra, and they narrowed it down to the year and type with the help of an expert. The next stage of the investigation involved ANPR cameras, and there was only one that he would have to pass through to get out of Cator Park, and it was broken at the time, so the team had to look at other vehicles that fitted the description within a 2-mile radius of the crime scene. In total, there were 60 Nissan Micras that had to be eliminated from the inquiry, and they made further media appeals, and they also put out images of the car and the unidentified man. This led to 170 separate pieces of information being received from the public, and the officers discovered the car that was registered to Koci Salemaj, and it soon aroused suspicion. The car had been in the Eastbourne area for the whole year prior to the murder, and then suddenly it travelled to London for a 4-hour period on the night of the murder, and then soon returned back to Eastbourne. Further checks provided a phone number for Salemaj. An analysis of the number showed that he'd made identical journeys in the car the same evening. Salemaj was arrested at his home on the 26th of September, and they found clothing that had matched what he was wearing on CCTV. They also found blood-stained trousers inside his property, and they seized this, and the blood matched DNA from Sabina. Police discovered that on the 14th of September, 3 days before the murder, Salemaj booked an expensive hotel room at Grand Hotel in Eastbourne for Friday evening. This was the night of the murder, and as he lived just 10 minutes around the corner from the hotel, they argued that he showed his premeditation to have some kind of sexual encounter that night. Phone records also showed that he was driving around Eastbourne and Brighton areas, and then Salemaj decided to head to North London at 20 to 8, and the phone connected to a mast near Cator Park, where he remained until 9 o'clock. This covered the time frame that Sabina was killed in and also matched the movements on CCTV. Less than an hour before Sabina's murder, Salemaj was caught on CCTV in a nearby Sainsbury's buying chili powder, a rolling pin and also an energy drink. The images were very clear and they showed him using his own bank card to pay for the items. And the police believe that he brought the rolling pin initially to use as his murder weapon. And from the debris that was left at the scene, they believe the murder weapon was a red vehicle warning triangle, which they believe that he chose to use in the last minute as well. They also showed through his phone records that he'd taken an unusual route to make his way home that evening, and this also added to the evidence. Police then carried out searches in a nearby river, and they used magnets to try to find evidence, and they recovered the metal warning triangle that Salemaj admitted that he'd used to commit the murder. In the days following the murder of Sabina, Salemaj returned to his job at a garage in Lewes, and he carried on as if nothing had happened. During all of his police interviews, he remained silent and he never gave any explanation as to why he did it. When he was charged with murder, he replied, "What will happen now if I open up and say everything?" He was remanded into custody and pleaded guilty on Friday the 23rd of February. When I first started covering this story, I remember the rumours that were speculating, people assuming that this may be a boyfriend or a husband, and the reality of the actual situation emerged slowly but surely, and it proved that there was absolutely no connection, and also sometimes you just have to accept that there are evil people in the world, and you have to take precautions when you're out and about, going to meet people, friends, family, anything, and always let somebody know where you are. So I really appreciate you joining me today, and rest in peace to Sabina Nessa, and thank you to everybody that has followed this story from the beginning. And I'll definitely keep you updated on anything else to do with news, and always try to highlight cases where females have been the victim of violence, very similar to the story that I covered the other day in Edmonton, where 3 women were abducted in 4 hours and one of them was murdered, and this actually happened a week before Sabina was murdered. And it shows that sometimes mainstream media don't always give the attention to the stories that they deserve. So I really want to hear what people have to say on this story, and don't forget to follow me online as well at Scarcity Studios on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter and Facebook, and I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.
Lost an amazing, caring, beautiful sister who left this world far too early. She didn't reach her 29th birthday next month. Sabina loved her family. We had lost our sister. My parents have lost their daughter. And my girls have lost such a brilliant, loving, caring auntie who dearly loved her. Words cannot describe how we are feeling. This feels like we are stuck in a bad dream and can't get out of it. Our world is shattered. We have simply lost for words. No family should go through what we are going through.